All right, hello, welcome back to Unqualified Analysis. The show with zero qualifications, zero credentials, and just about zero energy. It just keeps firing off takes. Anyways, today we are recording here early on a Monday morning, even earlier than usual. Usually I like to go around like noonish whenever I got a day off. Today, I don't have a day off. Today, I have work that is going to take me from 2 o'clock till about 11 p.m. But even with that, we are starting off the day with some headlines, if you will. Then we're coming back later to talk about the NBA Finals. So after this little intro here, I'm going to kick it to future Caleb here at about close to midnight, Caleb, right after work, super tired. The guy's going to be giving you the could be a finals wrap up, could be a preview for game 6 of the NBA Finals, but after the series got tied up 1-1 by the Heat last week, I mean, Denver's had full control. They swept the boards going into Miami, winning pretty handily the second time around in Game 4, taking a 3-1 lead. Jokic goes out late with 5 fouls in the fourth quarter. Left, they were up 10, came back in, they were still up 9. Even with Michael Porter Jr. not really doing much out there, they've still just got an overpowering team. And going up against the Miami Heat, I mean, backs against the wall. Series isn't over yet, but at this point, going back to Denver, Game 5, it feels like tonight is the night where almost said Denver Broncos, not the Denver Broncos. We'll talk about them tangentially here in just a little bit, but Denver Nuggets might be on the verge of winning an NBA championship. But hey, without further ado, I mean, let's just find out, shall we? Take it away, future Caleb. All right, and we are back. The NBA Finals is over. I am freshly post work. I clocked out no more than about a half hour ago. I'm tired. Who cares? You don't particularly. All I did was basically take off my work shirt, sit down here, grab an ice cold, definitely not alcoholic beverage because YouTube. And yeah, just got down here for you. So, oh, that is good. That is good. Nothing like a post work, definitely non-alcoholic beer. That's for sure. But I'm trying to be quiet. It's the middle of the damn night. It's 11:30 at night and we are here, and you know who else is here? The Denver Nuggets just won the NBA championship. Fended off the Miami Heat even in Tyler Hero's return, though. To be honest, I'm going to have to look at it here for just a second. I'm not sure what kind of impact Tyler Hero had on the game. He only scored 89 in this one. I'm not sure if that was due to the pace or just due to generally good defense by the Denver Nuggets. Bam Adebayo started hot. Had double digits in the first quarter, ended up with 20. Did not shoot well down the stretch. Tyler Hero was actually a DNP, so it was all just like a big old smoke screen there. Absolutely no impact on the game. Just not a very good shooting night from anyone in the Heat starting lineup. Jimmy Butler went 5 for 18 in this one. Kyle Lowry went 4 for 13. Gabe Vincent started 0 for about a million in the first quarter. He ended up with 3 for 13 from the field in the game. Probably the best shooter was Bam Adebayo with 9 for 20. That is simply not going to do it for you to win a game. Meanwhile, Nikola Jokic, 28, 16 rebounds, 4 assists, stud. Michael Porter Jr., from the depths of hell that he found himself in, rose up, gave him a good game when they needed him to, and closed this thing out. Contavious Caldwell Pope, yeah, 4 for 10. I don't even know why I said his name. Jamal Murray, 14 points. Not a great performance, but 94-89 final score. The Denver Nuggets have won the NBA championship. They did it. They can take a sigh of relief now. I said it before, this is the year they had to win it. They took that to heart, obviously they are listening to the podcast. What else could be the explanation here? But this is big. This is absolutely huge. And I don't know, certainly Denver has the core to get back here at some point. But I said it before, there's no guarantee that you're going to have that core of Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr. Nikola Jokic is the way he plays. he could play this way until he's about 45 if he wanted to. I got no worries about him. But those other two, Jokic and not Jokic, Murray and Michael Porter Jr., you can't count on them to necessarily stay healthy, be healthy for a stretch run at the end there. Specifically, Michael Porter Jr., he's had about 1 million back surgeries, and I think he might even be younger than me, quite frankly. So you can't guarantee that those guys will be there at the end. This was an opportunity they had to take advantage of, and to their credit, Nikola Jokic had like 10 or 11 triple doubles in the playoffs alone this year. Just an incredible run to the finals. Everyone on this team was hungry. They were ready to win a championship. They'd gone through their trials, gone through their tribulations to get to this point. And what do you know? They got there, and man, I guess to say I'm proud would be patronizing, but I mean, I love this team. I've really enjoyed watching them all throughout this playoff run. And to win a championship like this, who's to say? Maybe they go on and rattle off a couple more. But this was an absolutely magical run. All the health lined up at the same time. They were the deepest team in the NBA entering the postseason. Certainly showed throughout the postseason itself that they were the best team in the entire postseason. And all that pressure on their shoulders, being that best team in the entire postseason, to go out there and win the championship. They took it on their shoulders. They were ready to take it on their shoulders with all they've been through for the past couple years. And you saw it out there. They absolutely pulled through. They got the job done. And man, who's to say what the next couple of years hold, man? I want to see what this core can do. Maybe now that Jamal Murray is past the ACL thing, he can stay healthy from now on. I hope that's the case. Maybe Michael Porter Jr. Maybe he will stay healthy from now on. If those two do stay there, and they can kind of work around that, I mean, this could be a team. This could be a championship core for a while now. I mean, maybe they'll. I mean, they should challenge for championships in the future just by virtue of having that big old son of a bitch there in the center in Nikola Jokic. But hats off to him, man. This was an incredible run. Talk about incredible runs. I mean, the Miami Heat deserve credit of their own, and I'll give them their flowers in just a second. But the Denver Nuggets, I think going into the preseason, I said they might be one of if not the best team in the NBA this particular year with the core that they had coming back. And they were the 1 seed in the West going in. Didn't play well down the stretch, but they get to the playoffs and they absolutely flipped a switch. They beat the dog shit out of everyone in the West that they faced up against, pretty much. Did not lose a game at home until they got into the NBA Finals, and even then, that was the only game they lost in the NBA Finals, with that one loss at home. Just an incredible, dominant run by the Denver Nuggets, and a path that I am doubtful they will see as favorable of a path as they saw this year. Again, the Suns are going to be back right there next year again. Who knows what the Lakers will do, what kind of moves they do in this offseason. Memphis, who the hell knows? Sacramento is the team to watch next year, because they had one of those years where they got the 3 seed, needed to get their what is the words I'm even looking for right now? Need to get their whistles wet, if you will. Just get some experience in the postseason. They hadn't gotten that before. They're going to be dangerous next year. I think they're going to be as good, if not even better, than they were this year. Got to improve that defense. If they improve that defense, they could be one of, if not the best team in the NBA next year. All that is to say, their path to the finals will never be as open as it was this year. I think the Denver Nuggets will still have a championship core in place, but the path is going to be very tough from now on. So savor this championship. I'm not saying definitively that this will be the last one that they win, but what I am saying is that this was an extraordinary path, an extraordinarily dominant run to the finals, a fantastic run to the finals, particularly by Nikola Jokic. Jamal Murray, when they needed him to step up, he absolutely stepped up all throughout this playoffs. Michael Porter Jr. had some big-time moments. I mean, just hats off to him for a fantastic run. On the other side, though, I do have to give credit to the Miami Heat. I thought they would get swept in the first round by the Bucks. no question in my mind. Even with Giannis going down in game one, I still thought, and you can go back into the annals of this podcast, I still thought that they would win that series in five, quite frankly. And you know what? I was wrong. I was wrong about them in round one. I thought the Knicks would catch up to them in round two. I was wrong about that. I thought the Celtics might catch up to them in the Eastern Conference Finals. I was wrong about that. And I wasn't the only one. The Heat consistently proved everyone wrong throughout this postseason. Man, do I wish that they could get another player in there next to Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo to really, solidify a championship core, because this is the second kind of improbable finals run that they've had in the past 4 seasons or so. They had the run in the bubble, which they were uniquely suited to do above just about anyone else in that bubble, just by the way that they run that program down in Miami. And then they had this season where out of the play-in game, they go all the way to the NBA Finals. And the way that they closed out down the stretch, they were a terrible shooting team, a terrible offensive team down the stretch of this season. And they just kicked it into gear when they needed to in the playoffs. Hats off to them. This was about as magical a run as you can have for the Miami Heat without actually winning the championship. Going from 8th seed all the way to the NBA Finals, it's unheard of. It's a ridiculous finals run. I'm not really sure. Maybe we'll see something like this again in the future. It's going to be a long time before we see an 8th seed go on that kind of run again. And they almost coughed it up in the Eastern Conference Finals, but they got it done in 7. They just ran into a juggernaut. No two ways about it. The East, it maybe not at all it was cracked up to be in the regular season. I will admit that now. I think coming into the playoffs, I think I said you can make an argument for any of the top 4 seeds winning it. That simply was not the case. The Celtics were a flawed team. Sixers, obviously a flawed team. The Cavaliers, what more do I need to say? They got absolutely run off the court by the Knicks in the first round. So it was really ripe conference for the picking for the Miami Heat, and they took full advantage of it. They were the most disciplined team. They were the best coached team. Obviously, shout out to Eric Spoelstra, a damn good coach over there. And yeah, they got to this point, didn't quite get the championship, but this is a memorable run. I think the people of Miami will remember this run, even if it didn't result in a championship, just based on being back against the wall the entire time. Hey, you love to see it at the end of the day. Also, something that came across, we're getting away from the NBA Finals at this point. This is just something I want to leave you all with before I kick it back to Caleb of the past, if you will. Caleb of about 11 this morning, 12-ish hours ago. Fred VanVleet, formerly of the Toronto Raptors, declined his player option this year. He will be a free agent, and I'm no prognosticator on NBA free agency right now, guys, but I will tell you, the guy who was the head coach of the Toronto Raptors, Nick Nurse, is now the head coach of a team that needs to add shooters in order to get to that next level, that being the Philadelphia 76ers, Nick Nurse now being their head coach. And I'm just connecting dots here. That feels like a team that, one, needs a guy like Fred VanVleet, and 2, already has a built-in comfort level because they have Fred VanVleet's head coach there right now with the Toronto Raptors. That just makes entirely too much sense. Look for the Philadelphia 76ers to play big time into possibly picking up Fred VanVleet in free agency. Guy they need, and a guy that I think that they can convince to come there. Got some work to do with James Harden. Seems like Harden is trying to find a way back to Houston at this point because, I understand. I understand the priorities of James Harden. Hey, the strip clubs are hard to get away from. I get that to a large degree. The strip clubs, the food in Houston is just it's top notch, guys. If you ever go to Houston, just go on a culinary tasting tour. You will not be disappointed. And a guy like James Harden, with the way he can fluctuate his way, you know he is enjoying both the food and the bodacious booties bouncing up and down in the club and the strip club. So with that, I think we are just about done with the NBA portion of this, at least in terms of the finals wrap up and let you know the latest on free agency. So yeah, I think I'm going to edit this thing and go to bed. I will catch y'all on the morrow. In the meantime, Take it away, Caleb, this morning. You're doing a great job thus far. All right, and thank you, future Caleb. Get some sleep. You got work early in the morning. Not looking forward to that little turnaround there, but that's going to be a problem for future me, huh? All right, so we have got some headlines. What else is new? It's an off-season episode. We are going all around the sports world. So let's just get right into it, shall we? Starting off, we've got the, of course, biggest news of the last week as far as I'm concerned. PGA and Live merge. It is, a merger in name, I suppose. I think Jay Monahan's still going to be the head of the PGA, but the leader of the new entity that it will form when I think it's PGA DP World Tour, which is the European Tour, and Live are merging. The chairman of the new sort of entity is Yasir Al-Rumayyan, who is, if you don't know, the guy who manages the Saudi Public Investment Fund. So, also, Saudi Arabia is the one pouring billions into the sport. It's not the PGA, it's Saudi Arabia. So it's a merger, but in every merger, one entity has to buy the other, essentially. And it pretty much the Saudis bought Pro Golf. There's no two ways about it. They're the one pouring billions into the new entity. Feels a lot like Saudi Arabia just bought the PGA. And you know what? We have been proven time and time again, no one does sports washing like the Saudis, man. I mean, they are willing to throw some crazy money at. They've been doing it with soccer so far. Hell, they just brought Kareem Benzema over for like over $200 million a year. They probably could step in and do the same with Lionel Messi. I mean, hey, the Qataris gonna beat him to the punch going to PSG for that massive amount there. But hey, we'll talk about Lionel Messi here in a bit, because there is some news coming out about that, and it's pro America, pro freedom news, I will say. But we'll get to that in just a second. Right now, talking about Live with the Saudis basically buying up Pro Golf. Kind of nebulous as to what this means for the Live golfers. They were all celebrating. Looks like they're talking about maybe some fines that need to be paid to get back on the PGA Tour if they're Live. I'm a big look at the money sort of guy. Look where the money's coming from, and then you can kind of figure out what the rule structure is going to be like based on where the money is coming from. All of the money pretty much is coming from the Saudis right now, right? So it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense from my perspective for those guys. I mean, maybe if you're looking at it from an optics point of view, you slap them on the wrist with a fine that's like basically nothing to get back onto the PGA Tour. And then maybe behind closed doors that fine gets waived later. I don't really know how that would work. But it feels like they're just going to ease them back onto the PGA Tour. And I don't really know what happens to Live at this point. I don't know if they keep playing those 54-hole events. I don't know if they just keep going with what they're doing, or if they just say, hey, this was the end goal the whole time, trying to basically buy up Pro Golf and then go from there. I don't really know how that's all going to work. But I mean, once again, I said it before, I'll say it again, nobody does sports watching like the Saudis, man. They have been committed to this for a minute. This seems like what the long-term goal was going to be, just basically buying their way into a pro sports league and essentially buying it all for themselves. I mean, this is, you look closely at the deal, like I said, Yasir Al-Rumayyan is the head honcho of this new entity. I mean, presiding over the DP World Tour, the PGA, and the Live, whatever the Live ends up being when this is all said and done. So, hey, there is some shady stuff in their past, but they're trying to dazzle everybody with their sports prowess, man. And it could be, I mean, golf couldn't be like, I think, well, first off, let me back up here. I think for the individual golfers, this is only going to be better for them. I think they're going to be making a whole lot more money with the Saudi sort of injection of capital. I think they can take this thing truly global, as some analysts have said. I think they could probably go over to like play in Japan, play in some places in Asia. You know, the Saudis are going to have absolutely no qualm scheduling events in places like China. Hell, we just had, don't remember what the event was, but we had some Saudi official basically dismissing American concerns about, economic worries, and then just saying, hey, yeah, we want to collaborate with the Chinese. So yeah, I would be, I wouldn't say I would be shocked, but that would make a lot of sense for them to play some events over in China. And what's Jay Monahan going to do? Cry about it? I mean, he doesn't even really have the support of all of his players anymore. And that's another facet of this thing that I'll get to in just a second. I mean, Jay Monahan comes out of this looking like an absolute snake, but just sticking with how this is going to be for the players, they're going to make a lot more money. And I think there's going to be a lot more opportunities for endorsements really around the world, and growing the game in general. I think it's going to truly make it into a global sport if they want it to be that. And I think the Saudis definitely, for their own sort of benefit, want to do that. And speaking strictly from a business perspective, this merger between Live and PGA DP World Tour, all that sort of stuff, all the pro golf entities under one roof there, it makes a lot of sense from a business perspective. I mean, you look on one side, PGA Tour, they have the brand, they have the best players in the world still. I mean, Liv's got a couple great top line names, but you look at the bottom of that list, and it's pretty bad. Not a whole lot of players that would be on the PGA Tour proper. Not a whole lot of players that would be making cuts on the PGA Tour as well. So they've got the better players. They've got the I guess cachet might not be the right word, but they got the branding. They got the branding that you recognize all around the world. Liv certainly doesn't have that. But what they do have, what the Saudis do have, is bottomless pits of money, which they can throw at the PGA. And I mean, it makes sense if you want to. It's easier to buy into a brand and continue to bolster that brand with the capital you have, rather than build up a brand all on your own, which is what they were trying to do with Liv, but it was on the CW and literally no one was watching. I'm not sure it was ever the goal to ever actually have people watching. It was just to kind of put pressure on the PGA to eventually have something like this happen, because again, like I said, and you can just look at what Saudi Arabia's done really over the last several decades. I think post 9/11, they have kind of gone into a bit of a modernizing effort to where I think they fully recognize that oil is not going to be forever. They're gonna milk that teat for as long as they possibly can, but they're not stupid either. They're strategic about these things. They know that once the oil is gone, they have to exert influence some way, somehow. So they start investing in big time brands. They start really getting their foothold into Western culture through the business side of things, through large investments. And with that public investment fund, you can go look at what their holdings are. I mean, they're the largest stockholder in a lot of different entities that you have heard of. I mean, a lot of different companies have large Saudi holdings in their stock portfolio, or other way around. Saudi got a large holdings of a lot of different iconic brands in their stock portfolio, and this is really just the most ostentatious sort of chapter of that, most out in the open sort of thing. Usually they've been making these big time investments in the shadows, behind the scenes. This is them coming out publicly and saying, hey, come on over. We're okay over here in Saudi Arabia, which, you know, go do your own research. There's a guy by the name of Jamal Khashoggi who, if he was still around, probably would beg to differ about those sorts of things. But you know what? This is just kind of where we're at right now. The Saudis are throwing all the money in the world out there to make it seem like they're. I mean, in a lot of ways they have modernized to a certain extent. In other ways, they still. I mean, just because they let women drive now doesn't mean that they're a bastion of equality of the sexes or equality of the races. I mean, they still. You read some subtext there. Still don't necessarily love the Jews. Certainly don't love Israel being in existence as a state. So I mean, it's still. Don't be fooled by the outward messaging. I don't think anyone really is. This is still a morally questionable entity who is. I'm not really sure they're either on the side of the Chinese or the Americans. They're on the side of the Saudis and making their own dollar. And I mean, I give them credit. They are about as pragmatic as they come over there with Saudi Arabia. I think of the Middle Eastern oil states, Saudi Arabia is probably the one that, I mean, if you were to view these sorts of things in terms of friends and enemies, you know, they're one of the more tactful, cunning enemies that the United States has. If you want to call them that, it's not really necessarily that black and white, but if you want to simplify, that's kind of a way you can simplify it. That being said, I kind of got off on a tangent there. As far as this whole thing goes, I do not think golf is going to be the last bastion that Saudi Arabia tries to get into. I think, and I was having a conversation with this. There's disagreement from some of my friends about this, but I think if you just look at like American sports in general, I mean, just look at the players that Saudi Arabia has tried to get. I think they just got Kareem Benzema. They've been spending money elsewhere. I think they might have a holding in Man City, I want to say. But they've been really big into soccer. The next avenue that makes a lot of sense would be, if you're looking at just American sports, looking at a league that, yes, it's making money, but could be open to buyout by the Saudis. It's the MLS right now, man. I mean, it's a little bit less of a straightforward proposition than just going in and buying up the PGA Tour, because there's no teams on the PGA Tour. It's not, there's no franchises. It's a little bit less messy when it gets into buying these sorts of things. But I mean, just watch out. The MLS, they're making money, but they're not making so much money that the Saudis couldn't come in and just put an offer on the table they can't refuse. And speaking of an offer on a table that they can't refuse, I've already been rambling on this for a good long while, so let's talk about the Jay Monahan of it all. Jay Monahan, this is a guy when the players were first hopping over to the Live Tour, Jay Monahan was on the table saying, "Hey, I had friends who died in 9/11. I family members, whatever, friends of family members, friends family members. You know what I'm talking about. Basically, just calling the people that went over to live terrible." Terrible guys who just hate their country, and you know what, they should be excommunicated or whatever the hell Jay Monahan was saying. He was saying all that, telling the guys that were still on the tour, like, hey, be loyal and you will be rewarded. Then he goes, turns around about a year and some change later, and makes a deal with the Saudis. And understandably, it seems like pretty much every major player except Rory McIlroy was like, hey, fuck this guy. I don't want him as the commissioner anymore. And you know what? I can understand that, because, like I said before, he comes out of this looking like an absolute snake. And little side part of this, little sidebar. Greg Norman, I'll tell you what, he was a useful patsy, right? He came in there, shook some things up, barbed at the PGA when he could, and then when it was time to make a deal, the Saudis said, "All right, we don't need you anymore, but you can just step on out of the spotlight and then ride off into the sunset. We'll give you a nice paycheck to go away." That seems like what happened there. Like I said, useful patsy. That little that Greg Norman there. I'm not sure he was ever going to be around for the long haul, but he did his job when he was in the building. But Jay Monahan, I have no idea how he keeps his job long term here. I mean, I know that the Saudis have him in place right now, governing things from the PGA side, just kind of being a commissioner, if you will, still in that role. But it's clear that all of the guys that were in that room, that, I suppose, I think it was like some sort of meeting of most of the players with Jay Monahan, like after this thing broke, seemed like, the reports were like 90-10 players being like, hey, we don't want this guy as the commissioner anymore. We don't trust you. We think you're kind of a snake. We don't want you in this building anymore. Like I said, it's basically just Rory McIlroy that would still be like, hey, we're with you, PGA, Jay Monahan. And again, that's a guy, I have no idea how he's going to come out looking out of all this. I mean, he was loyal to the PGA. But I feel like there's a part where after your loyalty's been betrayed, maybe you got to take a step back and not side with management. I'll just put it that way. Maybe there is a time where you need to step back and side with your fellow players, and I feel like this is probably one of those times if you're Roy McIlroy, because no two ways about it, Jay Monahan absolutely talked out of both sides of his mouth. Out of one side, he's like, hey, the Saudis are terrible people. We'll never accept a deal with them. If you're accepting a deal, you're taking the money. You're taking that Saudi blood money, and then you're just forsaking your morals. And then out of the other side of his mouth, he's like, hey, what can we do here? And I'm guessing it was more of the Saudis coming in being like, hey, we're going to plop this several billion-dollar offer on the table that we know you can't refuse. We know what the books look like on your end. We know this is going to be an amount of money that you can't say no to. But to Jay Monahan, I wouldn't say to his credit, but he came in there and said, you know what, let's take this deal. Basically doing the exact same thing that all those players that he criticized ended up doing really beforehand. So yeah, I don't know how Jay Monahan stays around there. I feel like of all the people in this situation, I think Jay Monahan probably comes out looking the worst. Greg Norman probably comes out looking the most foolish. Absolute. I mean, if you're gonna say one thing about the Saudis, I would say it's a nice thing, but it's really just. I mean, they're pragmatic, and boy, do they know how to use people, the Saudis, man, because they absolutely used and abused the hell out of Greg Norman all throughout this process. And now, like I said, useful Patsy, he is gone by the wayside now. I'm rambling now, though. So, I mean, Jay Monahan, that's going to be one to watch. I think he'll be in his role for now. I don't know how long that's going to last. Maybe all this blows over the course of the next several months or so. But it feels like this is something that these players are not going to forget. Specifically the PGA players that stayed on the tour, I don't think they're going to forget what Jay Monahan did in this situation. And I don't necessarily think we have heard the last of this. I think at some point old Jay is going to get replaced somewhere down the road. But I have rambled long enough. Let's get into the next thing here. Another guy failed the idiot test, folks. Colts defensive back Isaiah Rodgers is being investigated for gambling on NFL games. Like I said, yet another player who has failed the idiot test here. And I've said it before in these sorts of situations. I'll say it again. Literally, all you have to do is two things. One, do not gamble on NFL games. Certainly don't gamble on your own games. And two, don't gamble in the facility. Now that's one that we figured out with the Jameson Williams situation. I think a lot of players had no idea that you couldn't even if you're gambling on other sports. Like I think Jameson Williams is gambling on like NBA and college football. Even if you're just gambling on those sports, you can't do it in the facility. And hey, you live and you learn. We can just not do that ever again. After that though, after that whole investigation came out with the Lions and the football team, the Commanders as some may call them, they're still not really, I mean, the Commies really just is not a name that has stuck very well in my mind, but that's another discussion for another day. After that investigation, it seems like the NFL really ramped up education in their OTAs and meetings such as those. So at this point, you really have no excuse to be still doing this, which, by the way, this was during the season that Isaiah Rodgers was getting investigated for this, for activity in the season, what he was doing. But from the sounds of it, it seems like he not only bet on NFL games, I think he bet on the Colts at one point as well, which if you're going to bet on NFL games, already a big old no-no, but you just can't. You can't bet on your own team, and that's what he seems to have done. The investigation is still ongoing, but if all of this stuff is proven true, we all know what's going to happen. It's not a life ban in the truest sense of the word, but it's the same thing I've talked about before. Maybe if you're a Jameson Williams or you're a Calvin Ridley, first round guy that could be a number one sort of player on your team, you're an possible all-pro caliber player, maybe you can survive something like this. Maybe you can survive the indefinite suspension. If you are a rank and file player, hell, if you are a special teams player, there is not a snowball's chance in hell that a team is going to take a risk on you after you went out there and committed the cardinal sin. Just because gambling is more prevalent now doesn't mean that the Lions aren't still there. You cannot gamble on your own sport. You can't gamble on your own team specifically. Like I said, this is just another failure of the idiot test if it does end up being proven right, which it seems like there is ample evidence to do so. They were small bets, but we're talking like hundreds of bets here. I mean, they were like $10, $15 bets, kind of like my unit sort of thing, but there were hundreds of them, and they were all on the NFL from what it seems like. I'm not sure how many were in the facility or not, but still, just a bad situation for Isaiah Rodgers, and I would imagine, again, when the decision comes down, if it ends up being against him, I don't see him being on the Colts any longer, which it's not the sort of guy that you want to lose, especially after trading away Stephon Gilmore this offseason. Sure, you still got Rocky Sin back there, but that's like the secondary is getting pretty thin for the Colts, and I'm not sure they had a whole lot of illusions of winning games this year. They're still not a very good roster for the most part. I think they can make some noise here and there. I don't think they're going to get deep in the playoffs though. But this is just not a guy that you would want to lose. Given the sort of personnel deficiencies that they have on the roster right now. But like I said, another guy failing the idiot test. You can't do nothing about it except for come down hard on him. That's just kind of that's how you combat these things. Unfortunately, I mean, if you fail the idiot test, you are going to get absolutely crushed by the NFL. And I think it's kind of got to be that way. Unfortunately, it's just the nature of the beast. Up next, we have got talking about Messi. Inter Miami is bringing Messi to the MLS. I don't know what the deal is going to end up being. It's going to be massive, though. It's going to be for a couple years. But once Lionel Messi is done with PSG, once his contract is up there, there was some talk about him maybe going to Barcelona. That seemed like a pipe dream from Barcelona fans more than anything else, because I mean Barcelona is just collapsing, absolutely collapsing. It feels like they're going to go bankrupt any day in some of these instances here, but instead of doing that, he's just going straight to Miami, enjoying that no state income tax and enjoying that life. We know Lionel Messi doesn't love income tax here, man. I mean, that's a storied past of his that we don't necessarily need to get into, but just go look up into his forays into accounting, if you will. Not necessarily him personally, but his accountant's forays into some questionable accounting practices when it comes to tax purposes. But again, neither here nor there. Messi, he is coming to Miami, the MLS being a retirement league for the best players in the world in soccer, is continuing to do that. And like I said before, man, you look at what the Saudis just did with Karim Benzema, would not shock me at all. Even if they just go out there and buy a franchise in the MLS, it'd probably start like that, right? Like it's kind of what they did with the Live. They started their own tour, but that's the PGA, there's no teams, like I said. So you got to either start your own tour or just start endorsing guys. It's probably a little bit more effective to start your own tour in that case. In this case, maybe there's a team in the MLS that would be willing to sell to the Saudis, and at that point they can just buy all of the retired players, then maybe expand their holdings from there. That's kind of what I'm thinking on that front. But hey, Messi coming to Miami, maybe we can get him playing on a U.S. team at some point. Like maybe 45-year-old Messi can win us a World Cup. Who's to say? He just did it with Argentina. Maybe not 45 at that point, but still, one of the most skilled players of all time. Maybe he can be a U.S. citizen. Maybe he can play for our country, though. If you know anything about the geopolitical past of the Americas and how seriously in that context that people in South America tend to take their soccer, I don't really see that happening. That's probably not going to be good for Lionel Messi's image. I think I'll put it to you this way. If Lionel Messi played for the United States in a World Cup, I don't know if he could ever go back to Argentina. Certainly, I don't think he could go back to Argentina and feel safe, because I think the people there would think it'd be a mild betrayal. We'll just put it to you that way. But outside of that, that's more of a joke sort of suggestion. Again, this is just we've carved out a niche here in the global soccer community. We might not be the tops of the tops, maybe not the cream of the crop as far as the level of soccer, but we've carved out this niche where older players that have been really good for a long time over in Europe can come over and make some good money to play in America for a little bit. I mean, Zlatan Ibrahimovic parlayed his play in the MLS to getting back into the European game. So maybe that's what Messi's doing. Feels like at this stage in his career, Messi's going to come over to Miami and take the money, enjoy the weather, and then just kind of ride off into the sunset from here. And I think that's kind of the career arc for a lot of guys that came over here. I mean, I'm talking like, David Beckham, Thierry Henry. I can just keep on going with players that have come over from the European side and just said, hey, this is my retirement league here. And you know what? I don't think we're ever going to be the tops of the tops as far as like young talent is concerned. So you got to carve out your niche where you can. I mean, infuse as many younger players as you can that maybe they can hop their way over. Geez, the frog in my throat just keeps jumping up, man. I apologize for that. But if we're not going to have the tops of the top, at the very least, have a niche in the community, and that's what we got right now. Love to see it. Not that I actually watch a whole lot of soccer. It's big news that Messi's coming over, right? So got to react to it as it comes through. We've got a lot of headlines, though, so let's just keep it moving. I don't really care too much about soccer. Just had to mention it because it's what's going on in sports right now, and there's certainly not football going on, so I digress on that front. Few football headlines here in just a bit, though. Don't you worry. First and foremost, though, let's get back to basketball. Chris Paul and the Suns are in discussions for possible buyout, possible release. Whether or not he returns, still kind of up in the air, but seems like the Suns want him back at a more reasonable number. That being said, if you know anything about Chris Paul, he is a vindictive man, and I think if the Suns buy him out, I think he will view it as a slap in the face if they try to bring him back on a lower contract, just saying, basically, we don't think you're worth this anymore. Come on back for cheaps if you want to. I think Chris Paul probably looks at that and says, I ain't no punk, I'm going to go elsewhere. And if you're looking at teams that need a point guard, just need a true point guard to distribute a little bit and get the offense kind of less stagnated, there are a couple teams that could be on the list. I'm looking specifically at the Boston Celtics. I've talked about that a little bit on this podcast. They don't have a true point guard, and sure, Chris Paul isn't the bona fide sort of superstar that you want in there necessarily. Not the stage in his career. He's a great player historically, but let's face it, he's gotten old at this point. So he's not going to give you that vintage Chris Paul sort of output that you have come to expect at this point, but he is good enough to distribute the ball, move the ball around, and be a nice maybe championship winning piece on a roster that just needs a little bit more from the point guard position. So maybe the Boston Celtics get in there. Feels like the Boston Celtics need to make a splash, though. Maybe go for like a Dame Lillard or someone like that. Also, the Lakers. Lakers could be a really interesting spot for Chris Paul. They do have Dennis Schroeder in there, but I think Chris Paul, even at this late stage in his career, probably a bit of an upgrade from what Dennis Schroeder gives you. And let's face it, though, just because he wouldn't be signing back with the Suns doesn't mean Chris Paul wouldn't still be signing a bit of a team-friendly contract, if you will. That's kind of the expectation. You get that big buyout, and then you go over and play for someone else, especially at this stage in his career. Chris Paul only has like one or two more bites of the apple before he has to ride off into the sunset into retirement. So feels like if you're looking to win now, probably either Boston Celtics or Los Angeles Lakers at this point. Looks like he's going to be a free agent, though. It's just a matter of when, not if, at this point. Maybe they do it after the draft. Before free agency, for sure, I would imagine that they're gonna come to some sort of agreement with Chris Paul, and we'll just have to see where it goes from there. Right now, just looking like the Suns are going through a few changes, if you will. For obviously a head coach. Who the hell knows what's going to happen with DeAndre Ayton? I think the getting rid of the head coach tells me that they're going to try and reconcile things with DeAndre Ayton, but I don't know. It just does not seem like the other players on that team like him necessarily. The one thing I just keep going back to in my mind is the play in I can't remember if it was versus Denver or who it was against, but DeAndre Ayton trying to kick it out to Chris Paul, throwing it about 5 feet above his head, and then it pans back. It pans back to DeAndre Ayton, and he's saying, "Catch that shit." Like Chris Paul can jump that high. Like I just don't know what that's going to be like. It feels like if you got DeAndre Ayton in the fold over there, One, he's not proven to be a very consistent player in the playoffs. He has shrank up like a pair of Inuit testicles. Basically, every time he's been put in the spotlight in the postseason without Chris Paul throwing him beautiful lobs. Outside of that happening, it feels like he has shrunk up in the biggest moments, and outside of that, doesn't seem to really get along with his teammates too much. But hey, they're keeping him around. The next guy they bring in there is the head coach. I'm sure they've already hired someone. Well, yeah, they hired Frank Vogel. I mean, talk about a Spider-Man meme right there. I don't really know if there's a huge difference between what Monty Williams brings you and what Frank Vogel brings you. I mean, good for them. Hope it works out, I suppose. Still absolute BS that Monty Williams was fired there, but also it feels like it was more of a player's decision rather than a front office decision. But that's just kind of the way things are in the NBA nowadays. So we'll see. Chris Paul in specific, though, I could see him going to the Lakers after. Hey, you remember back in the day when David Stern came in and smited down that trade from New Orleans to the Lakers? I think Monty Williams might have actually been the coach for New Orleans at the time, ironically enough. But you remember how David Stern was trying to fend off the super team era, and then all of a sudden LeBron James goes down to Miami, and that's just kind of the way it goes. Anyways, hey, he could go back to the Lakers all like a whole like decade and some change later at this point. A little bit too late to actually make an impact. Hell, Kobe and Powell were still there whenever they were trying to make that trade, and I don't think a single player is still on the Lakers from that team from when that thing was going to happen. So yeah, I don't know what I was getting at there, but hey, he could go back to the Lakers, or he could go to the Lakers at long last after all these years after David Stern shot it down, smited it out of existence in that trade. We could be getting a mea culpa of sorts. Maybe not from the league, but Chris Paul finally fulfilling his destiny, going to the Lakers when this whole thing is said and done. Let's get back to football for a little bit, though, shall we? Dalvin Cook finally got released from the Vikings, and you know what? Not excited about the Vikings backfield now, man. We knew this was going to happen. Now that it's official, though, we can look at the starting backfield and be like, hey, I don't know about this one, Chief. Talked about Alexander Madison last week in context of this whole story. He's going to be the number one guy, at least on the paper, going in. Not the greatest success rate as far as yards over expected, whatever the stat is that I'm looking for. He's not very good at getting yards from the line of scrimmage. I will put it that way. Just because he looks like Dalvin Cook does not mean he is Dalvin Cook. He had some of the worst like yards over expectation numbers in the entire league among running backs, and I'm not sure that's going to get better by making him the starter. I certainly hope it does. And again, you got a young guard in there in Ed Ingram, who's probably going to get better over the course of this year. You also got Ezra Cleveland on the other side. He kills people. Love watching him play. I mean, good run player. And you've got Garrett Bradbury. He's a perfectly average NFL center. No complaints about him for the most part. So I mean, hey, maybe running into that interior, you're doing what? And also left out the tackles, but that's because they don't need to be spoken for. O'Neal, Darisaw, one of the best tackle duos in the entire league. I don't need to spend a whole lot of breath on that. It's still a solid offensive line. So maybe we can do some things with that. But maybe it's just anecdotal screenshots. Feels like Alexander Madison's missed a lot of holes in his career. Running into the backs of offensive linemen, there's a clear gap to run into on the other side of the formation, like right next to him. So I don't know how this is going to work out. Feels like we're going to be seeing a lot of Ty Chandler, Dwayne McBride, rookie out of UAB in there. Maybe Canadian Nwangwu gets in there in the backfield as well. Does not feel like an ideal situation for ample production out of the backfield, though. In Kevin O'Connell I trust, in Kwesi I trust, but at the same time, feels like feels like maybe we should have drafted a running back higher. And I understand that we had other sorts of needs to address. I think Mekhi Blackman certainly was a pick you had to have there as our, I think he was our first pick in this draft in the third round. Needed some guys in the secondary. Probably needed some guys in the secondary more than we needed a running back at that point. But man, it's looking interesting. This is going to be a real test of how Kevin O'Connell can scheme up the run and make something out of nothing pretty much. How good is he in that Shanahan type of mold where he can kind of scheme up a run game and make it happen that way more so than a player can in that sort of role? Who's to say? We're going to find out throughout the course of this year. Outside of that, the offense still looks pretty good, though. Like on the outside, you still got Jefferson, still drafted Jordan Addison, still got KJ Osborne out there. You got TJ Hawkinson, absolutely loaded with weapons in the passing game, which I think should actually make things a little bit easier in the running game. But that committee, it's not the strongest running back by committee in the entire league. But speaking of which, now that Dalvin Cook has officially been released, where is he going to go? I think there's been rumblings about Miami. There was a trade that fell through back in March for Dalvin Cook to go to Miami. But at this point, I mean, you look at that depth chart. They just signed Raheem Mostert and just signed Jeff Wilson to extensions. They drafted Devon Achane. That's three guys right there that they want in the fold. Is Dalvin Cook going to fit in there? And I think you probably make room for Dalvin Cook. If that is the case, but I don't know, man. I feel like Devon Achane's going to take that starting role by the end of the season next year. I mean, whether Dalvin Cook is in there or not, I think Devon Achane is an absolute stud. I mean, many people, I think, in the NFL circles have not watched Devon Achane play football throughout the course of last season. Being a fan of Mississippi State being in the same division as Texas A&M last year, let me tell you, Devon Achane was one of the most electric players in all of college football. He was the entire Texas A&M offense last year, and that offense was terrible. I'd say most of the yards they got and most of the explosive plays, definitely most of the explosive plays, I'll tell you that much, came from Devon Achane. Legit, like, sprinter speed. Ran, I think, the fastest 40 of any running back at the combine. If not the fastest, he was in the top three at the very least. Ran like a 4.32 or something like that. And I think he could be even faster than that from what I've seen on the tape of him. He's an explosive type of player. He's the type of player that fits very well in that Mike McDaniel style of offense where you just need a straight line runner that gets the speed going. I think he's gonna end up usurping either Mostert or Jeff Wilson by the end of the year. But they got a crowded backfield right now, man. And I mean, maybe if you bring in Dalvin Cook on a modest contract, you can fit him in there. But that's four guys. You aren't walking into a year with four guys on the roster. One of those guys is going to have to get cut. It's not going to be Achane because they just drafted him. It's either going to be Jeff Wilson or Raheem Mostert. And like I said, they just signed both of those guys to extensions. So I don't really... I mean, I guess it would be cool to see Dalvin Cook go in there. I think Dalvin Cook kind of fits what Mike McDaniel is trying to do as far as a straight line speed guy. But I just don't see a whole lot of room for him on the roster. Either there's not a whole lot of room for him, or they're going to have to make some uncomfortable decisions coming into training camp because, like I said, you're not keeping four running backs like that on your roster. You're just simply not. So that would be some hard discussions to make there. What I think is a bit more likely, and it makes a lot more sense from a team building perspective, Denver Broncos have been speculated about as well as being in this sweepstakes. They got Javonte Williams, and they're coming off an ACL injury. And behind him, I think it's like Latavius Murray is the second string running back right now, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe they got another guy in there that I'm not really thinking about. Free agency, it was so long ago, guys. I can't remember all these sorts of things. But yeah, bringing in Dalvin Cook would make a lot of sense for the Denver Broncos. I think that would be a legit 1-2 punch between Williams and Dalvin Cook in there. Guys that kind of play similar style, very physical guy. I think Javonte Williams is probably a little bit more on the physical side than what Dalvin Cook is, but you get that speed with Dalvin Cook. Still physical, big, imposing sort of guy, like 6'2", 220-some pounds as well. Still a big guy, but much more of a straight line runner. And I think, again, maybe not quite to the extent of what Mike McDaniels does with the Miami Dolphins, where really you just run to the hole and just speed kills essentially in that offense. It's not quite like that, but a straight line runner, a downhill type of runner, is kind of what it's kind of the mold that Sean Payton likes to have in that running offense. And that running offense has, I mean, a lot like the Shanahan run game. It's been a kingmaker for a long time. It's been a plug and play sort of running offense where you can basically have all sorts of names you've never heard of go in there and then just be productive out of the backfield running between the tackles. So I think having Javonte Williams and Dalvin Cook in that offense would be really good. I mean, it would make a lot of sense in conjunction with the offensive line additions that they made this offseason. Obviously, Sean Payton wants to bolster that run game from where it was last season, bolster that offensive line from where it was last season. I think you can really do that by bringing in Dalvin Cook. I think he might end up there when it's all said and done. Outside of those two, I mean, sure, maybe someone could step up. Who's to say? Maybe he, decides to go full heel, stay within the division. I'm not really sure. If you look at the depth charts in the backfields in the NFC North right now, Lions just drafted Jahmyr Gibbs. They already brought in David Montgomery this offseason. The Bears, they just drafted somebody, I want to say. They already got Khalil Herbert, though Dalvin Cook is better than Khalil Herbert. Let's not get it twisted here. So hey, maybe if you want to go to the Chicago Bears, you can do that. I have a feeling that being a Florida boy, going to Florida State, playing indoors for many years with the Vikings, I have no inside knowledge, obviously, but I just got a feeling that Dalvin Cook will want to go back down where he can, play in some warm weather if he has the option. Miami would be attractive in that way, but I think if you're looking at a team fit, I think the Broncos would probably be the best place for him to go. And I said it before with Eric Kendricks. I've said it with Adam Thielen. No hard feelings here from my perspective, man. I mean, it sucks that they were a cap casualty when it's all said and done, but I hope to see them go someplace and perform well. I just hope to see them perform well against teams that are not named the Minnesota Vikings when it's all said and done. But outside of that, water under the bridge, man. Go get your money. Hopefully, go get a ring somewhere. Really all we can ask for at the end of the day. So let's keep it moving, though. We got a couple more things to get to. DeAndre Hopkins, another guy that got cut last week. He visited the Titans on Sunday. He will be visiting the Patriots later this week. Right now, those are the only two teams that are publicly in the running right now. There have been rumblings off and on about the Buffalo Bills, maybe the Baltimore Ravens. Those free agent visits have not materialized at the time of this recording, so we'll set those to the side right now. Just visited the Titans. That would make a whole lot of sense. They got absolutely no receivers in there right now. It's basically Treylon Burks and a bunch of dudes out there at the moment. If DeAndre Hopkins is looking to win a championship, maybe not the option I would be going with necessarily. But if he's looking for a lot of targets in an offense that absolutely needs him, could do worse than the Titans. Also, Mike Vrabel, solid head coach over there. I mean, always seems to be having his team in games that they've got no business whatsoever being in. So it could work from that perspective. Patriots are an interesting one, though. He was with Bill O'Brien with the Texans. Really hasn't had a whole lot of bad things to say about Bill O'Brien. This isn't like a J.J. Watt, Bill O'Brien situation where even now I think J.J. Watt and Bill O'Brien have kind of buried the hatchet with how that whole thing went down. But I think DeAndre Hopkins, he was a 3-time All-Pro in that offense that Bill O'Brien was in, with basically no quarterback to throw to him. Mac Jones is better than just about every quarterback that he had with the Houston Texans, quite frankly. So that would be an interesting one. Also a team that sneakily, they're in a absolutely stacked division. I mean, the fact that one of those teams, the Buffalo Bills, the New York Jets, New England Patriots, Miami Dolphins, one of those teams has to finish last, and every single one of them got better this offseason. I mean, it is insane how good the AFC East is shaping up this year. But you bring in DeAndre Hopkins, I still think the Patriots are probably the weakest team in that division right now, but they've got one of the better defenses. They've got a legit offensive coordinator in there now. They're not messing around with they're not messing around with the Matt Patricia defensive coordinator calling offensive plays. Mac Jones trying to seek outside help because this shit simply ain't working. Essentially, I mean, I feel like this could be a team that could surprise some people this year. That defense will keep them in a lot of games this year. That make no bones about it. They have a very, very good defense to the New England Patriots. On the other side of the field, probably could have stood to add a few more weapons this offseason. I mean, Juju Smith-Schuster is, that's a signing, I suppose. I mean, maybe Bill O'Brien can use him a little bit. Kendrick Bourne, I think, is probably going to be a little bit more in the fold this year. But they lost Jacoby Myers to the Raiders this offseason in free agency. Bringing in DeAndre Hopkins would certainly help, and I think he steps in. Either him or Devontae Parker is the number one right away. And I think when DeAndre Hopkins is out there and he's healthy, it feels like he's the number one receiver on that team if he steps in right then. But I don't know. Those are the two teams right now, the Patriots and the Titans. If it were me choosing, I would probably go with, well, actually, man, maybe this is just loser thoughts right now, but thinking about the no state income tax with Tennessee, I mean, I'm living there now, so I mean, I'm a little bit biased on that front, but who, man, can make some good money. You can make some good money, and he knows that life already, being with the Houston Texans. I think taxes are pretty favorable with Arizona too. If he goes to New England, I mean, that's a tax bracket he has not seen before in his adult life. So something to consider there as well. I don't think it really plays into DeAndre Hopkins' mindset. He's made a whole lot of money throughout the course of his career. He's ring chasing now. And if he wants to ring chase, of the two teams that I just mentioned there, Patriots are probably the one that you're going to go with if you want to try and win this year. That being said, just because he hasn't visited those teams doesn't mean that the Ravens and the Bills aren't still possibly in the running for this guy. If either of those teams step up and be like, hey, we got some money lying around, we might want to sign you. I mean, those are two teams that are primed and ready to have a championship run right now. I mean, obviously, Buffalo's trying to figure things out with Leslie Frazier not in the building anymore. Sean McDermott's going to be calling the plays over there, though, and there's a reason he got that job as the head coach of the Buffalo Bills in the first place, because he was a dynamic play caller on the defensive side of the ball. And they still got very good personnel. They've still got Jordan Poyer in there. They signed a safety in free agency. They've got players coming back off an injury on the outside for corner. They lost a bunch of linebackers. They at the very least lost Edmonds in there. That's not going to help, but they still got a very strong defensive line. Very good defense. Josh Allen, need I say more on the offensive side of the ball? But really, if you look at it, they drafted Dalton Kincaid, but on the outside, it's Stephon Diggs and a bunch of deep threats right now. If you want some more juice in that offense, I think DeAndre Hopkins would fit in beautifully with what they're building over there with the Bills. And you look at the Ravens, I mean, they just basically put all the weapons you could ask for around Lamar Jackson and said, figure it out now. Like, they brought in OBJ. They have Rashad Bateman in the building already, which who's to say how long he stays healthy? That's neither here nor there in the purposes of this discussion. They bring in Zay Flowers through the draft. You bring in DeAndre Hopkins as well on the outside there, and you got a squad at receiver right now. Also, not to mention, they draft Isaiah Likely. They've already got Mark Andrews. It is a loaded offense. The offensive line, always a bit of a concern, but Lamar Jackson covers up for a lot of those deficiencies. And then on the defensive side of the ball, it's Ravens football, man. They are perpetually good on defense. Got some things to figure out in the secondary, but still, dynamic front seven, very good players in the back end. Kyle Hamilton really came on down the stretch last year. Roquan Smith anchor in the middle there for that defense. They're going to have a very good defense and a very good offense to boot. Again, if either the Bills or the Ravens get in on this thing and they somehow bring in DeAndre Hopkins for a visit, I would not be shocked in the least if those teams just put an offer out there and he takes it, because those are the two if they end up being in the running that you got a legit chance to be kind of a championship, maybe not a front runner, but in that front pack looking to win this thing. So going to be interesting to see how it progresses. It's seeming to pick up a little bit of steam, a little bit of pace as this thing goes on, though. Also, in football news, Saquon and Josh Jacobs do not appear to be interested in signing their franchise tenders. Josh Jacobs all but said like he seems to be prepared for the long haul because I don't think the Raiders are going to pay Josh Jacobs, unfortunately. Previous regime, all that sort of stuff. I mean, same sort of thing with Saquon, but I mean, in that soulless Patriots Moneyball scheme of building a team. Paying a whole lot for running back, especially in this market of running backs, not necessarily going to be on the list of things to do for him. But Josh Jacobs, as a result, I mean, he's using rhetoric like, "Hey, I'm taking a stand for all the running backs right now." He seems to be prepared to go to the distance right now. He seems to be absolutely ready to just take this thing all the way through the season. Maybe the Raiders remove the franchise tag from him and let him be a free agent. That would be a big time development there, and I think he would get paid a pretty good amount in free agency if that were the case. But he seems to be ready to go for the long haul. Saquon Barkley's a little bit more up in the air. I think he's been a little bit more like, I want to get an extension done. But even so, I think it was yesterday he talked at a charity event, basically just laid it out like, hey, you don't want to sign us to long-term deals. You got the franchise tag set at $10 million, which is not really market value for a guy of my skills. And once you set the franchise tag on us, we don't really have a whole lot of power. It's kind of cut and dry the way it is. It feels like, I mean, it's a July 17th deadline to get a deal done before the franchise tag is signed there. It feels like we are hurtling towards a point where a decision is going to have to be made for Saquon Barkley to where he might not sign that franchise tender. And if that happens, who knows? He could go the way of Josh Jacobs and then just not really play for the Giants this year, which it's coming to a head here in this running back market, man. It is a tough time to be a running back. I've been on the record saying that there should be room for really, really good players to make really good money just based on them being not just a force running between the tackles, running outside, being a force out of the backfield, pass blocking, all the ways, I mean, the gravity that an elite running back commands in the backfield like that changes the way an offense is played. I think he should be paid commiserately for that. And not every running back is replacement level, right? Like, just because running backs have been devalued, I think there is a place for elite running backs to get paid elite money, even if the rest of the market is kind of down, kind of saturated with high level talent over there. So I don't know. I feel like this might be something that needs to happen for change to happen in the running back market. I also could see the teams just holding pat and be like, especially talking about the Raiders. They just drafted Zamir White last year. I think they just drafted another running back this year. They could very easily, it feels like, just say, hey, all right, Josh, you're a great running back. You led the NFL in rushing last year, like 5 yards per carry for us. But you know what? Nah, we don't need you around. They could very easily take off the franchise tag or just let him sit on ice the whole season and wait him out if they really want to. But I don't really know how this whole thing ends. I don't think any of us really know how this whole thing ends. Feels like it is going to get very uncomfortable for both Saquon and Josh Jacobs and the teams that they play for, the Raiders and the Giants, as this whole thing gets going. I'd like to see them get paid. But in an ideal world, they get paid. I'm not sure that's going to happen. This thing is going to get to a head as this summer progresses, though. So not necessarily a story just yet, but we are gearing up. The rhetoric is ramping up, and it's going to be a war for contract money here as we get towards the end of this summer. I got a couple headlines here. Towards the end, I'm going to skip one just because, it feels kind of played out. Well, we're going to hit on it here, do the quick 1-minute version of the Zion Williamson story. His main girlfriend got her pregnant. They announced the baby. I don't know if they announced the gender or whatnot, but they announced the baby. Zion apparently had a side chick who he was, whispering sweet nothings to, and she did not know about the main chick. So to her surprise, Zion Williamson having a kid. This side chick, not too pleased about the whole situation. She has been absolutely tearing into Zion on Twitter, revealing some things that may or may not be true about Zion. I mean, really just been. At first, it was like, okay, this is entertaining. Zion's on blast. Now it's just like, okay, chill out. Chill out. We are getting to a point where this is getting uncomfortable. But moral of the story is here: Zion Williamson, much like every other NBA player, be fucking. That's the long and the short of it. I just hope he gets in shape. That's my main thing here. Stop drinking all the Cokes. Stop drinking all that. Stop eating pizza. Stop eating Taco Bell. Get a damn nutritionist. Just stop being fat. That's really the only thing I care about Zion. Stop being fat. Stop being injured. That's all I want from you here at this point. Outside of that, though, that was the 1 minute version of the Zion Williamson story. Got a couple fun ones for you here on the way out. We're gonna hit these real quick. First off, Conor McGregor sent the Heat mascot to the ER from a halftime bit gone wrong. And I say halftime bit gone wrong. I think it's just like Conor McGregor doesn't know how to throw a fake punch. Like I think the whole thing was the Heat mascot was supposed to be, he was like putting up the dukes, had the boxing gloves on. It's supposed to be entertaining, and then Conor McGregor just socks him in the face. And not only that, instincts take over. He does a ground and pound real quick on the Heat mascot's face. Heat mascot goes to the ER, and it's tough look. I mean, Conor McGregor cannot help but get caught up in these sorts of situations. It feels like he is addicted to just punching people, it feels like. But I'll tell you what, this guy going to the ER makes me even more impressed with that old guy that just ate a shot from Conor McGregor for not drinking his proper number 12 back in Ireland. The Irish, they're built different, man. I will tell you what, that old man just ate a shot, apparently didn't even really flinch when he took that shot. He just kept it moving. They were separated because Conor McGregor, what are you doing punching an old man? This is just the latest chapter in that. And if a grown man in a mascot costume is being sent to the ER with those sorts of punches, I mean, hats off to that old man in Ireland. I mean, just terrible hair. There you go. But hats off to that old man in Ireland, because I mean, I get more impressed with him every single day. You take a punch from a professional fighter, barely flinch in doing so. Not only do you not go get medical attention, you don't necessarily need to either. He probably just kept drinking beer. Like I said, the Irish, I mean, the famine built a hardy people there that stuck around in Ireland. I'll tell you what, man. I'm more impressed every day with what the Irish are, man. But rounding this thing off, this was a ridiculous scene. Well, first off, Nick Scott, never heard of him, me either, but he had an amazing, incredible 72-foot putt on a playoff hole to win the RBC Canadian Open over the course of the weekend. Golfer, if you hadn't caught up by the context. That 72-foot putt, by the way, longest putt he has nailed in his entire career as a PGA Tour golfer. That's how insane it was. But after the win, he's hugging his caddy, fellow golfer Adam Hadwin. Another guy, you heard of him? I haven't. But Adam Hadwin, fellow golfer, runs on the green, starts spraying Nick Scott and his caddy with champagne. Security guard sees this and is like, you know what? Not on my watch. Form tackles the guy straight to the ground, shoulder to the chest, drive through the green. I mean, it was a beautiful tackle. Beautiful tackle by the security guard. Absolutely saved the day by not allowing the celebration to happen. No, sir, this is golf. You cannot be spraying champagne like that. It is simply not what we are here to do. It is not gentlemanly of you to run on the green spraying champagne. You are getting a shoulder in the chest through the ground. Probably knocked his wind out if I had to guess. But I will say, security guard, absolute hero. Doesn't come out of this looking awesome. But in fairness to him, I watched the video, watching the behind angle of the golfer Adam Hadwin that came in with the champagne fountain at the end there. Looking at him, looking at what he was wearing, he wasn't exactly wearing golf clothes. I think he was looking a lot more like a spectator than a golfer. So I can understand where the security guard would just see a guy in jeans and long sleeves and be like, "Oh, this is a fan coming in, trying to do some fuck shit. I'm going to drive him through the earth, try to get him to China with my shoulder through the ground." Essentially, is what he did. I understand that. I get it to a large degree. So I'm not holding it against him. He did not look like a golfer. But if you have not seen that video, do yourself a favor. Go look up Adam Hadwin tackle on Twitter. Probably will get you what you're looking for there. It was a beautiful scene, just a beautiful scene. I think Adam Hadwin himself tweeted out that I think it might have tweeted out the image of just him being tackled in the first place. That whole video is hilarious though from the back angle. You can see the security guard watch Adam Hadwin walk up with the champagne, his eyes go wide and be like, it's my time. It is my time to shine. Run around the golfers, absolutely form tackle, wrap up. Was a little bit high, but you know what? I'll give it to him. I'll give him credit where it's due. Absolutely had the power to drive Hadwin through the ground. You love to see it. Love to see that form tackling going on there. But hey, congrats to Nick Scott, though. I mean, that's a hell of a way to win a tournament. I could not imagine the absolute adrenaline that is coursing through your body in that given moment once you hit that 72-foot putt to win that whole thing. So hats off to him. Hats off to the security guard for being a hero, for being an absolute unit in the tackling. I mean, he's given himself a reputation through this whole thing that I think should strike fear in the hearts of people that come by the RBC Canadian Open in the future, or whatever golf event he happens to be working. Just knowing that absolute unit could drive you through the crust of the earth with his shoulder if you give him half a chance. But with that, we're done, folks. Thank you so much for tuning in. This has been an Unqualified Analysis. I don't have an outro in front of me yet again because we're really flying by the seat of our pants as far as the unstructured nature of this podcast right now. But go ahead, subscribe wherever you're listening to it. Apple, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube. Shout out to YouTube over there. Still getting some good momentum going there, so let's keep that going. Get the subscribers up on all platforms. If you didn't enjoy this thing, just keep it moving, my guy. You don't got to tell anyone about it. And if you do, I'll find you. Don't worry about it. With that said, though, what else do I got on the docket here? Oh, yeah, follow me on all my socials at Caleb Verzak. That is at Caleb Verzak on Twitter. Basically just Twitter at this point. I'm lazy. I work a full-time job. I don't care about social media too much. Screw it. Sue me. Who cares, man? Outside of that, if you want to contact the show, shoot me a DM at Caleb Verzak on Twitter. Probably be the easiest way to get in touch with me. Otherwise, shoot me an email at unqualifiedanalysis@gmail.com. That is unqualifiedanalysis@gmail.com. And yeah, thank you so much for tuning in to Unqualified Analysis. As always, I got no clue what I am talking about, but one thing I learned over the course of this week that I really learned a couple months ago, but it's in my phone, so I'm going to read off the fact right now. The man that created the patent for the modern toilet was named Thomas Crapper. That's right, last name Crapper. It's nebulous as to whether people started using the term crapper because of Thomas Crapper. But at the same time, the dude's name was Crapper. That's fantastic. Modern toilet inventor was named Thomas Crapper. You can't make this shit up. But see y'all later. See y'all next week. I am going to go slowly get ready for work, I suppose. Also finish up editing this. I don't know. See y'all.